Meanwhile, time continued to pass, and at last, the long-awaited diplomatic mission had arrived. The royal envoys prepared to depart for Ming. The Minister of Foreign Trade proposed bringing a trade agreement for the Ming Empire. The king listened to the proposal and discussed it with his advisors before finally granting his approval. Crown Prince Hiang stood gazing at the sky, lost in thought. However, his daydream was interrupted by the cheerful voice of a young girl calling out to him. "Hey, Hiang, do you know what this is?" Princess Jongso, the elder sister of King Moonjong, approached him, holding a plate of colorful, intricately shaped snacks. Hiang hesitated for a moment before answering uncertainly. "Is it yakgwa?" Jongso burst into laughter and patted him on the back. "Wrong. This is dasik. You've been studying for 100 days, and you still don't know?" she teased. Dasik was a traditional Korean confection often served with tea. Jongso kept teasing him. "You should go outside and take a walk instead of reading books in the palace all day. If you keep this up, you'll end up like father." At her words, Hyang pictured his father, round and plump. He frowned and retorted, annoyed, "I'm still better than you." Jongso simply smiled and waved as she walked away. "Just make sure to study hard." As she passed by the palace attendants, she politely greeted one of them. "Good morning, Chief Eunuch." The eunuch responded respectfully. "Did your highness sleep well last night?" As Hyang continued walking, he muttered to himself, "She always teases me like that." Yet he understood. It was just her nature at that age. His thoughts drifted toward the future. He watched Jongso smiling brightly in the distance. In 2 years, that smile would disappear forever. Jongso would become the source of sorrow throughout the palace. She would die of smallpox. Smallpox was completely eradicated in modern times, but in history, it was one of humanity's most feared diseases. It caused high fever and widespread rashes, leaving deep scars. Worse, it claimed countless lives, even within the royal family. That grim reality weighed heavily on Hyang's mind, making him realize how fragile life was, even for those who lived within the grand walls of the palace. During the medieval era, smallpox had a terrifying mortality rate of 30%. No wonder it was considered one of the 3 deadliest disasters, alongside tigers and war. King Sejong was devastated when his daughter succumbed to smallpox. After all, she was his beloved firstborn. But Hyang would not let history repeat itself. With unwavering determination, he swore to find a solution. He already had a plan. The scene shifts to Hyang standing before a cow. With a confident expression, he asked an elderly servant, "This cow has smallpox, doesn't it?" The cow's owner knelt respectfully and answered, "Yes, your highness." Hyang smiled confidently. "Perfect. You will be the key to everything." The royal guards exchanged puzzled looks, confused by the crown prince's intentions. They were now on Neobeol Island, what would one day be known as Uido Island. The land here was not fertile for farming, so the people relied more on livestock than agriculture. Hyang questioned the shepherds kneeling before him. "Who among you has never had smallpox? Raise your hand." A farmer dressed in brown raised his hand and said, "I haven't, your highness." Hyang stared at him intently and asked again, "Did you start raising cattle before or after that?" The farmer replied, "Since before I came to Neobeol Island, your highness." Hyang grew even more intrigued and continued his questioning. "Has there ever been a smallpox outbreak on this island?" One of the farmers hesitantly answered, "Yes, there has, your highness." Hyang's eyes lit up. "I knew it," he thought. He recalled Edward Jenner, the scientist who discovered the world's first smallpox vaccine. Jenner realized that those who had been infected with cowpox would not contract human smallpox. From this discovery, he developed a vaccination technique that eventually saved millions of lives. Turning back to the farmers, Hyang asked, "Who among you knows the secret method?" An old man dressed in white stepped forward and said, "I do, your highness." Without hesitation, Hyang extended his hand and said, "Do it to me." The farmer was startled, thinking he had misheard. "Your highness, are you serious?" he asked, his voice trembling with fear. With unwavering determination, Hyang handed him a needle. "Yes, I want you to use that method on me right now." Meanwhile, in the royal palace, the king was listening to his minister's reports on the kingdom's finances. "Our financial situation is dire. We have no choice but to raise taxes," one of the ministers said grimly. But, before the discussion could continue, a servant suddenly rushed in, his face pale with panic. "Your Majesty, there's an urgent matter," he said, gasping for breath. The king, who had been sitting calmly on his throne, asked in a serious tone, "What happened?" The servant stepped closer and whispered in the king's ear, "It's about the crown prince. He tried to take his own life." The king's expression instantly changed, from composed to alarmed. He bolted upright and shouted, "What do you mean? Where is the crown prince now?" The ministers were stunned by the king's reaction. They exchanged confused and worried glances. "What's going on?" they murmured among themselves. The servant explained that the crown prince had just returned to the palace. Overcome with anxiety, the king hurried out in a panic. Eventually, he spotted the crown prince walking in the distance and called out, "Hyang!" Hearing the frantic call, the palace attendants and the crown prince himself were startled. King Sejong rushed forward, breathing heavily. "Where have you been? Are you hurt?" Hyang, bewildered by his father's reaction, could only stammer, "No, father." I'm fine. What's going on? The king's face darkened, his anger beginning to rise. He turned to the servant and demanded an explanation. Tell me, what happened? The servant nervously replied, Your Majesty, I only repeated what the eunuch told me. Eunuch. O immediately fell to his knees, bowing deeply. Your Majesty, I deserve to die, but I swear I did not lie. The king's fury intensified. Are you mocking me? I was told the crown prince tried to end his life. At that moment, Hyang spoke up from behind. Father, the eunuch didn't lie. I believe this is about what happened in Neo-Baal. The king looked at him in confusion. What are you talking about, Crown Prince? Hyang took a deep breath and explained, It's just a misunderstanding. I've been researching a disease that frequently appears and spreads among the people. Recognizing the description, the king asked, Are you talking about smallpox? Hyang smiled and replied, Exactly, father. While studying medical texts from China, I discovered a method to treat this disease. So, I took pus from an infected cow and injected it into myself. The king fell silent at his son's words. His face paled, his mind reeling in disbelief. A pounding headache overtook him, and in an instant, he collapsed on the spot. The ministers and Hyang cried out in panic, Father, wake up! Father! After a while, the king finally regained consciousness. However, his expression was still filled with shock. With a trembling voice, he asked, So, you're telling me that you injected cow pus into your body? Hyang calmly nodded. Yes, father. King Sejong still couldn't believe what he had just heard. You must not know what pus is. Before he could finish his sentence, Hyang interrupted with a small chuckle. Of course I do. Pus comes from the wounds of an infected cow. The king tried to suppress his anger and asked, So, the procedure you mentioned, you only applied the pus to your skin, correct? However, Hyang casually replied, No, father. I used a needle to inject it into my body. The king's eyes widened and his fury exploded. He stepped forward, grabbed Hyang's shoulders, and shouted, You reckless child! How dare you do something like this just because you read about it in a book? Hyang tried to explain. Father, I'm fine. Someone experienced performed the procedure on me. The king was stunned. What? Who? Hyang pointed at someone among the servants. Him, father. A man dressed in simple clothing immediately bowed deeply. Your Majesty, I am merely a humble servant assisting the crown prince. Hyang then introduced the man. Father, this man is a shepherd from Neo-Baal Island. He is the one who performed the procedure. He said this is a secret technique passed down for generations to treat smallpox. King Sejong still couldn't believe it and turned to one of the cattle herders. The herder respectfully replied, Yes, Your Majesty, that is true. The king approached Hyang and, in a softer voice, asked, Crown Prince, are you telling me that this so-called experienced person is a mere cattle herder? Hyang answered confidently, Yes, father. He has cured everyone on the island. But the king raised his voice once again. Even so, you should never use yourself as a test subject. What were you thinking? You are the crown prince. Hyang did not back down and firmly replied, Life is life, father. There is no difference between nobles and commoners when it comes to life and death. Many people have been cured and regained their health, so why should I be afraid? The king was still worried and said, But this was reckless? What if something terrible happened to you? Hyang fell silent for a moment before responding, Father, you know how many lives have been lost to smallpox. This disease will eventually reach the palace one day. If I can prove that this treatment works, we won't just be able to protect the people, we can also safeguard our own royal family. Don't you agree, father? King Sejong was silent for a long time, deep in thought. I truly don't know if this child will be a blessing or a disaster for this nation. His actions resemble those of a wise philosopher, yet at times he strikes like an unpredictable storm, the king pondered. Finally, the king let out a sigh and gave his orders. Take this man to prison. Make sure he is well fed and not tortured. He then turned to the cattle herder and said, If anything happens to the crown prince, your life will be the price. However, if your words prove to be true, you will receive a great reward. The cattle herder trembled in fear and responded, I understand, Your Majesty. Meanwhile, the inspector was speaking with an astronomer. Have you heard about the crown prince? He asked. The astronomer nodded. Yes, he claims to have recovered from smallpox after being treated by a lowly servant. The crown prince even injected cow pus into himself. The inspector was astonished. That sounds absurd. But if it's the crown prince, he must have his reasons. He has always been capable of creating things beyond anyone's imagination. Before he could continue, two men ran toward them in a panic. The crown prince! They shouted. The inspector was startled. What happened? The eunuch anxiously replied, It's serious. At the palace, the crown prince lay in bed, his body burning with a high fever. Even so, Hyang insisted, I'm fine. But the servants looked at him with concern. How can you say that? Your fever is burning like a furnace? You insolent fool! How dare you endanger the crown prince and mock the royal family? Sodol, who had no idea what was going on, was confused and exclaimed, What's happening? The warden snapped at him. You still dare to play dumb? The crown prince is bedridden, his body burning with a fever so high, it's as if he's on the brink of death. The palace servants were in a panic. Meanwhile, inside the prison, Sodol, the man deemed responsible for the crown prince's condition, heard the news. He remained calm and said, "Ah, you must be talking about the fever." The prison warden was taken aback. "How do you know that?" Sodol explained that this was a normal reaction. The fever will last for 5 days, but after 10 days the crown prince will make a full recovery. At first the warden was skeptical, but just as Sodol predicted, 10 days later, Crown Prince Hyang was completely healed. As if he had never been sick, he stood before the king with pride and declared, "Look, father, I have conquered the threat of smallpox." The king gazed at him thoughtfully. Deep inside, he still wasn't fully convinced that this method was truly effective, based on just a single case. But Hyang was undeterred. He made a bold request. "Allow me to go to a place where smallpox is spreading. I will prove it." The king immediately refused. "No, I will not allow it." However, before anyone could say anything else, the Inspector General suddenly spoke from behind. "Your Majesty, we cannot let this matter go unresolved. This could very well be a mere coincidence. Isn't the Crown Prince essentially forcing people to undergo this treatment?" Hyang paused for a moment before responding firmly. "Inspector General, hasn't your own family been using the same method for decades? How can you call this a coincidence? Besides, we will ask for voluntary participation. There will be no coercion." He continued, "Everything in this world evolves through experimentation and the courage to try. If we are too afraid of failure, what will become of this kingdom?" At those strong words, the room fell silent. No one dared to argue. The Inspector General clicked his tongue in frustration, but eventually relented. Areas hit hardest by the smallpox outbreak were prioritized for treatment. At first, many people were afraid, but after witnessing the promising results, they began volunteering for the treatment. To ensure the effectiveness of this method, King Sejong ordered a population census to be conducted alongside the smallpox vaccinations. This strategy was like killing two birds with one stone. Vaccinations were administered while the census ensured accurate results. Once the effectiveness of the treatment was confirmed, the king finally gave permission to implement the vaccination across the entire JOSEON kingdom. One day, as Hyang was walking through the palace, a familiar voice called out to him, "Hyang, look at this. Do you know what this is?" Hyang turned to see his older sister, Jungso, smiling while holding something in her hands. "That's a sogo, a traditional drum," he replied. Jungso nodded. "That's right. I'm going to give you a little performance as a gift." Even though she wasn't particularly skilled at playing instruments, Jungso still tried to entertain her younger brother. Hyang listened patiently, but eventually he couldn't take it any longer. Afterward, Jungso teased him. "You can't just sit around studying all the time. You have to enjoy the arts too. Oh, have you gained weight recently?" Just then, a servant arrived to escort Jungso away. "Princess, it's time to go," they said. Jungso waved goodbye. "See you later, Hyang." Hyang smiled as he watched his sister leave. Deep down, he felt relieved. At the very least, Jungso was healthy now. With the smallpox issue mostly resolved, Hyang shifted his focus to other policies. He began compiling medical records into a book that documented traditional Korean treatments and agricultural methods suited to Joseon's climate. Not only that, but Hyang also proposed policies in various other fields, including the creation of new maps to aid the kingdom's development. Seeing his accomplishments, Hyang smiled with satisfaction. These efforts laid the foundation for greater efficiency on a broader scale. Though some ministers occasionally voiced objections, Hyang often dismissed their protests outright. This earned him the nickname, the Six Ministries' Sleepless Road. The administrative center of Hanyang remained bustling day and night, reflecting the kingdom's tireless activity. Hyang's reputation as an unwavering leader spread far and wide. As the ruler of the kingdom, King Sejong often spent time in deep thought. One night, he gazed up at the starry sky, lost in contemplation. Without informing his guards, he decided to walk alone to his son's quarters. A servant, noticing his intent, attempted to stop him, but the king reassured him. "I simply wish to speak with my son in private," he said. When he arrived outside Hyang's chamber, he noticed that the oil lamp was still lit, a sign that his son had yet to sleep. A court official stepped forward and reported, "Your Majesty, the crown prince often stays up until 1 or even 3 in the morning. He really should sleep earlier." The king was taken aback. He's still so young, yet he works so hard. Inside the room, Hyang was writing when he heard the announcement of his father's arrival. He quickly put down his brush and greeted the king. "Father, what brings you here so late at night?" he asked respectfully. The king smiled. "I was just taking a walk and saw your light was still on." "What are you working on?" Hyang answered honestly. "I was reading a book, father." Curious, the king asked, "A Western book? Like, what is it about?" Hyang explained, "It's called The Art of Alchemy." The king frowned in confusion. "Alchemy? What is that?" Hyang elaborated. "It's the study of how to transform metals like iron or tin into gold using various methods." The king stroked his chin, deep in thought. "Turning iron into gold? Is that even possible?" Hyang sighed. "Unfortunately, according to this book, it's not. However, alchemical experiments played a crucial role in the development of modern chemistry." Hearing this, King Sejong's curiosity grew. "Let me see the book," Hyang nodded. "Of course, father. I even have a translated version if you'd like to read it together." The The king took the book and skimmed through the pages. I'm just curious about how Western writings look. Hours passed. Hyang started feeling drowsy, struggling to keep his eyes open, hoping his father would finish soon. However, the king remained completely engrossed, reading with intense focus. Hyang was amazed by his father's dedication. "Father, aren't you tired? Why are you so focused?" The king smiled. "Western writing is quite fascinating." He then pointed at a line of text and said, "Look at this. From the patterns I see, this appears to indicate the subject of a sentence. Notice how most sentences begin with the same letter." He then broke down the words into their initial, middle, and final syllables. Hyang listened in awe. In a short amount of time, his father had already recognized the spelling structures and patterns in Latin. Hyang remained silent for a long while, utterly stunned by his father's brilliance. "This man, he's not just a king, he's a true genius," he thought. Seeing his son speechless, the king patted his shoulder and asked, "Am I wrong?" Hyang snapped out of his thoughts and quickly responded, "No, father, you're absolutely right." The king then spoke. "This makes me wonder, what do you think about creating a unique writing system for JOSEON?" Hyang was taken aback, but immediately replied, "I've long believed that JOSEON needs its own writing system. Even among those who know Chinese characters, very few are truly proficient." The king hesitated before saying, "But if I announce my intention to create a new script, the Hall of Worthies will oppose me immediately." The Hall of Worthies, established by King Sejong, was a research and policy institution heavily influenced by Confucian thought. Hearing this, Hyang responded, "However, there are many people who can't even write petitions because they don't know the characters. If you explain this properly, everything will go smoothly." The king smiled at his son's answer. "It seems you've been struggling with writing all this time, haven't you?" Hyang gave an awkward smile, though deep down, he truly found writing difficult. The king then recalled his own experience. "I remember when I first tried to write. It was incredibly difficult. I spent 2 hours just composing a single poem. But when your grandfather saw it, he burst out laughing." Then the king stood up, walked toward the door, and said, "It's been long enough. You should get some rest now." Hyang bowed and replied, "Yes, father. You should rest as well. JOSEON needs you to stay healthy." The king was pleased by his son's concern. With a fond smile, he said, "This boy, I hope you turn 15 soon." Hyang was puzzled, unsure of what his father meant, but the king simply gave him a warm smile and said, "Go to sleep." The next day, Hyang stood before the royal court and addressed the king. The 6 ministries should be completely separated, and each ministry must document its work in detail. If records are kept only in chronological order, future generations will waste valuable time searching for the information they need. The king turned to the court officials and asked if anyone had a different opinion. They answered in unison, "We agree with the crown prince's proposal." After careful consideration, the king spoke. "I also think this is a good idea. I understand why certain policies were implemented, but future generations will only grasp the reasoning behind them by looking at well-organized records." He continued, "From now on, each minister must organize and classify records according to the crown prince's instructions." Everyone in the court listened attentively and responded in unison, "We obey your majesty's command." Once the meeting was over, the officials dispersed. However, the Grand Inspector and the Chief Royal Historian walked together, looking displeased. The Chief Historian frowned. "This is troubling. Now the Crown Prince is even restructuring how the 6 ministries record their work. That should be our responsibility." The Grand Inspector responded firmly. "Aren't all official records already documented in state reports and the daily journals of the Royal Secretariat? Those records already detail the king's daily life and his interactions with the bureaucracy." The chief historian acknowledged this, but questioned whether duplicating records would only add unnecessary work. The Grand Inspector added, "Even without these changes, we've been extremely busy lately, and it's all because of the Crown Prince's actions. If this continues one day, he might cause serious problems. To be honest, if things keep going this way, the atmosphere in the court could change drastically. There may even come a time when the Crown Prince ends up destroying everything he built himself." However, the chief historian disagreed. He believed that while the Crown Prince's reforms were radical, his intentions remained virtuous. Meanwhile, the Crown Prince was filled with excitement. "This is true reform. I will completely change these disgusting old habits. Just thinking about it fills me with energy. I won't tolerate this bureaucratic nonsense any longer," he declared passionately. The Grand Inspector added, "But every proposal the Crown Prince makes goes against tradition. What if, without realizing it, he revives the dark shadows of the past?" Suddenly, a voice interrupted. "That will never happen." The 2 officials, who had spoken with such confidence moments ago, immediately lowered their heads. State Councilor Ryu Jung-hyun had arrived. With a firm expression, he declared, "Many people read a few books and believe they are qualified to discuss state affairs, yet they know nothing about how the world truly works. If the Crown Prince oversteps his bounds and dismantles what we have built, no matter that he is the Crown Prince, I will not stand idly by." Meanwhile, at the royal palace, King Sejong convened the morning session. "I can imagine returning from the Ming Empire must have been difficult," he said. "Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty," a court official replied respectfully. The king then inquired about the status of JOSEON's embassy. One official reported that after lengthy negotiations, the Ming Empire had approved the establishment of a JOSEON embassy in Shandong province. Hearing this, King Sejong felt somewhat relieved. Good. Was there anything else of importance during your journey? He asked. One of the officials reported that many prominent merchants were eager to purchase paper from JOSEON. Paper? The Crown Prince repeated, as if seeking confirmation. The official continued. Yes, Your Highness. Many traders want to buy our paper because its quality is far superior to that of Ming's. They've even requested that we bring more on our next visit. After a moment of thought, King Sejong considered increasing paper production at the royal factory. Very well, you may return to your place, he said firmly. However, just as the situation seemed to settle, Hyang suddenly spoke. Your Majesty, I have something to say. With just one sentence, cold sweat formed on the foreheads of the officials around him. They feared that the Crown Prince was about to propose another idea that would add to their workload. Inside the Grand Palace Hall, tension filled the air. King Sejong hesitated before finally asking, Must you speak now? Hyang, the Crown Prince, met his father's gaze with unwavering determination. Yes, father, he answered resolutely. Seeing his son's persistence, the king finally granted him permission. Very well, go ahead. With a calm yet confident voice, Hyang made his proposal. I propose that we abolish the paper factory. His words sent shockwaves through the room. The ministers and officials exchanged stunned glances, their jaws nearly hitting the floor. How could the Crown Prince suggest something so absurd? The paper factory had long been a major source of income for the kingdom. Ming citizens sought after their paper, and JOSEON's high-quality paper was a valuable commodity. This decision contradicts everything the Crown Prince has advocated for. What could be the reason behind it? Some officials murmured, unable to believe what they had just heard. Hyang, hearing their whispers, furrowed his brows and spoke firmly. Silence, and listen to me. He looked directly at the ministers before continuing his explanation. As my father and all of you know, JOSEON's paper is of exceptional quality thanks to the skill of our craftsmen. However, there is a serious issue we cannot ignore. He took a deep breath before continuing. These craftsmen are not being paid fairly. Their wages are so low that many struggle to support their families. Some are even forced to take on extra work or abandon their trade altogether to become farmers or laborers. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy. Some officials began to realize that something was deeply flawed within their system. However, not everyone was convinced. Ryu Jung-hyun, the influential state councilor, immediately responded. This is not an issue of a flawed system. It's an issue of laziness. Look at the military factories and other royal workshops. Their workers have low ranks, yet they continue to perform their duties diligently. He continued in a challenging tone. Those who choose to leave are simply people unwilling to put in the effort. If they truly wish to stay, they must work harder. Hyang shot Ryu Jung-hyun a sharp look. His fists clenched as he struggled to suppress his anger. Are you truly that blind? Hyang finally retorted. Officials like you receive numerous additional benefits. Even in your own residence, guests arrive at dawn, bringing gifts and paying their respects. Ryu Jung-hyun remained composed and replied, That is merely an expression of gratitude and goodwill. Hyang let out a faint smirk before replying, I am not saying it is wrong, but if we continue to neglect the well-being of our craftsmen, how can we expect them to remain dedicated? If this continues, it won't just hinder our technological advancements, it will lead to the complete disappearance of JOSEON's paper-making art. His words echoed through the chamber. Some officials began to waver in their stance. King Sejong appeared deep in thought, realizing there was truth in his son's argument, but before he could make a decision. Crown Prince, do you realize that King Taejong established this paper factory to ensure the quality of our currency? If the factory is shut down, we will face the same issues as before. He looked at Hyang with unwavering conviction. I urge you to reconsider this decision. King Sejong glanced left and right, listening to the two opposing arguments. Doubt began to creep into his mind. As uncertainty clouded his judgment, Hyang met his gaze and gave him a subtle signal. Softly, Hyang murmured, Father, you know what must be done, don't you? I trust you. King Sejong looked at his son, then closed his eyes for a brief moment, taking a deep breath. A crucial decision had to be made. Suddenly, Hyang's expression changed. The determination in his eyes faded, leaving his face blank. He carefully observed his father. King Sejong, the dignified and wise ruler, turned back to him and asked, Do you think this is the right decision? Hyang fell silent for a moment. Since when did his father start asking such difficult questions? Was he expecting Hyang to be more involved in this discussion? Letting out a quiet sigh, the Crown Prince finally responded firmly, Have the ministers forgotten about the golden-tipped pen? The room fell into silence. Hyang continued, That document clearly outlined the court standards. The paper must be 3 choke wide, 2 choke tall, with a smooth surface and its color as bright as peach blossoms. We employ craftsmen to meet these standards, yet we pay them next to nothing. Ryu Jung-hyun hesitated, but after a brief pause he asked, Then what about the costs? Hyang gave a faint smile. Allow me to give you an example, he said confidently. If we recognize these craftsmen as royal merchants, their business will flourish. In turn, the court can collect taxes from their profits. This revenue would far exceed the initial costs we invest in them. The officials fell into deep thought. carefully digesting the Crown Prince's argument. Suddenly, a voice emerged from the center of the room. I believe the Crown Prince's proposal makes sense. All heads turned toward the speaker. It was none other than Kim Ji-um, the Minister of Taxation. He continued, "For nearly 3 generations of the JOSEON dynasty, this issue has remained unresolved. If we have a way to cut costs while increasing revenue, why not give it a try?" However, before anyone could respond, General Sung spoke up in a loud, reprimanding tone. "Minister of Taxation, mind your words. Have you forgotten that every person must follow the teachings of the sages to maintain peace in our nation?" He then turned to King Sejong and said, "Your Majesty, the Crown Prince's suggestion may bring short-term benefits. However, to achieve everlasting peace and prosperity, we must prioritize the moral education of the people above all else." Suddenly, another official interjected, "Your Majesty, what the State Councilor just said is nothing but empty theory. How can the people embrace the teachings of the sages when they are constantly struggling in poverty? Education is important, but we can only educate the people if they are well fed." His statement immediately ignited a heated debate. "How could a high-ranking official say such a thing?" someone retorted. But the commotion came to an abrupt halt when King Sejong suddenly raised his hand. The room fell into complete silence, all eyes now fixed on him. "Enough!" The king's voice echoed throughout the hall. "I have heard enough from all of you." He let out a deep sigh before continuing. "Yes, moral education is important, but ensuring the people's livelihood is just as vital. I want all of you to find various solutions to address this matter." No one dared to oppose the king's command. The officials simply lowered their heads and responded in unison. "We shall follow your Majesty's orders." King Sejong then continued, "As for the issue of the paper factory, I acknowledge that the Crown Prince's argument is valid. However, shutting it down abruptly may not be the right course of action." He scanned the faces of the officials before delivering his final command. "Therefore, come up with a more comprehensive solution and report back to me." The room fell silent once more. No one dared to challenge the king's decision now. The fate of the paper factory, and perhaps even the future of the kingdom, depended on the solutions the officials would propose. In unison, the officials responded, "Your will is our command." After giving his final instructions, King Sejong turned toward the Crown Prince, the son he cherished deeply. "Crown Prince, listen carefully." Fiang immediately bowed with respect and replied, "Yes, father." The king continued, "I know you care deeply about the prosperity of the kingdom and the well-being of the people. As Crown Prince, that is your duty. For that reason, I will not reprimand you. Instead, I wish to commend you." Outwardly, Hyang showed gratitude, but deep down, he thought, "Wait, wasn't that just a scolding?" King Sejong went on, "But there is something you must keep in mind. Every time you speak, there are always those who oppose your ideas. This poses a challenge for the ministers, and even I often struggle to fully understand the reasoning behind your proposals. That is why I believe you need to articulate your political views more clearly when presenting your ideas." At the mention of political views, Ryu Jung-hyun's expression darkened. The king continued, "You will do this in the main hall, in front of all officials ranked 3 and above, including the ministers. Can you handle that?" Hyang, sensing a great opportunity before him, could barely contain his excitement. "So, you want me to deliver a full presentation?" he asked, seeking confirmation. The king nodded. With unwavering confidence, Hyang replied, "Yes, father. I only need 5 days to prepare." Once the meeting concluded and the officials exited the main hall, murmurs of conversation filled the air. "How can a child possibly have political views?" one official scoffed. "I don't understand what His Majesty is thinking either," another chimed in. "No matter how brilliant the Crown Prince is," one official said, shaking his head, "he is still just a child. Even with all the preparation in the world, convincing the ministers will not be easy." "I agree," another added. "Even if he spends 5 days preparing." Before he could finish, Ryu Jung-hyun suddenly cut in, "No, we must also prepare thoroughly." The group turned to him, sensing that Ryu Jung-hyun had something in mind. "Not just documents," he continued. "We need to familiarize ourselves with the national policies of other countries as well." One official hesitated. "But he's only 9 years old. Do we really need to go to such lengths?" Ryu Jung-hyun shot him a sharp look. "Have you already forgotten what that 9-year-old has done to us so far?" "It may be the Crown Prince who speaks," he went on, "but these ideas clearly reflect His Majesty's own thoughts. Up until now, has the king ever opposed the Crown Prince's proposals?" The officials exchanged glances. "No, that has never happened." Ryu Jung-hyun's voice was firm as he continued. "Yes, the Crown Prince is only 9 years old, but we must remember who stands behind him, His Majesty himself. We must prepare carefully. Never forget how we built JOSEON. We cannot allow the mistakes of past kings to repeat themselves." Another official suddenly voiced his concern. "Are you suggesting that we censor his speech?" The chief censor, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke with a resolute tone. "Regardless, we must first issue an official reprimand. How can we allow a 9-year-old child to discuss matters of politics?" Amidst the murmurs of those scheming to bring Hyang down, one person silently recognized the prince's talent. "But from the Golden Pen incident, we saw that the Crown Prince truly has the ability. Before he could finish, the chief censor angrily cut him off. That's exactly what frustrates me the most. The room fell silent once again. They all knew that no matter what happened, the fifth day would be the decisive moment. The chief censor let out a long sigh, his face filled with regret. I should have opposed him from the start, he muttered. When the crown prince proposed using gold-tipped pens for trade, I knew it would be the beginning of everything. Yet from that moment on, His Majesty and the ministers only cared about wealth. Clenching his fists, his eyes burned with determination. All I can do now is regret not being more resolute. We must file an official complaint against the crown prince immediately. The ministers exchanged glances before nodding in agreement. Yes, we must act quickly. Without wasting any more time, the chief censor led a group of officials out of the chamber, their departure leaving behind a tense atmosphere. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the palace, a eunuch bowed respectfully before delivering his report to King Sejong. In short, most officials did not react positively to the crown prince's proposal. King Sejong let out a long sigh, clearly frustrated. Almost unconsciously, he tugged at his ear in irritation. Are they all so stubborn and conservative? However, there was something intriguing in the report. That said, the eunuch continued, many acknowledge the crown prince's intelligence and resolve. Even among those who oppose him, some have begun to recognize his talent. King Sejong fell into deep thought, his expression darkening. In a low voice, he murmured, I don't have enough talented people around me. On the other side of the palace, Crown Prince Hyang sat in contemplation, reflecting on recent events. This kingdom lacks talented people. Those boomers are too stubborn, too tied to old traditions. Lost in thought, a nearby eunuch hesitantly asked, Your Highness, what does boomers mean? Hyang glanced at him briefly before replying nonchalantly, It's nothing. I wasn't talking to you. Yet his mind continued to race. This isn't even the late years of the dynasty. It's still the early era of JOSEON. The ruling class should still be flexible, shouldn't they? How can I convince those hard-headed ministers? More than that, there was something else bothering him. Father said he would gather all high-ranking officials, including those of rank 3 and above. They'll definitely look down on me just because I'm a child. Hyang clenched his fists. Then, as if an idea had struck him, his eyes sparkled. All right then, I'll give them a small glimpse of the 21st century, capitalism and modern administrative structures. Without wasting another second, he stood up. Eunuch, I need to prepare something. Take me to the Royal Art Bureau and the Armory. The eunuch was startled but quickly bowed deeply and replied, As you command, Your Highness. Deep inside, he couldn't help but wonder, what kind of trouble is the Crown Prince going to cause this time? 5 days later, the main hall of Gyeongbokgung Palace was bustling with activity as high-ranking ministers and officials gathered in full force. Among them, casual conversations filled the air. Minister Cha, it's been a while. Minister Cha smiled warmly. Minister Park, how long has it been? When did you return to the capital? I just arrived yesterday, Park replied. However, their light-hearted chatter quickly shifted to a more pressing topic. So, His Majesty summoned us to hear the Crown Prince's political views, one official asked skeptically. Isn't this absurd? Making us come all the way here just for that? Another grumbled. Yes, what a waste of time, someone else muttered, shaking his head. Why should we even bother listening to this? Many officials nodded in agreement. It was clear they saw this as nothing more than an unnecessary formality. But before their murmurs of dissatisfaction could spread further, a loud announcement echoed throughout the hall. His Majesty the King has arrived. Instantly, silence fell over the room. All the officials bowed their heads as King Sejong entered and took his seat on the throne, radiating undeniable authority. Without wasting time, the king got straight to the point. As you all know, the Crown Prince has recently proposed several policies, he said firmly. However, I believe we cannot fully evaluate these proposals without understanding the foundation of his thinking. His gaze swept across the officials, who were now listening attentively. That is why I have gathered you all here, to hear the Crown Prince's political views firsthand. A tense silence filled the hall. Officials exchanged glances. Some remained skeptical, while others grew curious. But one thing was certain. Today, they would witness something unprecedented in Joseon's history. King Sejong's eyes sharpened as he addressed his ministers. I expect all of you to listen carefully and guide him so that he does not stray from the right path. In unison, the ministers responded, Yes, Your Majesty. From the distance, the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. All heads turned toward the source. Crown Prince Hyang strode forward with unwavering confidence, followed by attendants carrying several mysterious objects. The sight made the ministers exchange puzzled looks. What is that? Someone whispered. Hyang stopped before his father and bowed respectfully. I am grateful to Father for granting me this opportunity, he said with a steady voice. Now, I will present my political views. King Sejong nodded. Proceed! With permission granted, Hyang clapped his hands, and immediately the attendants unfurled a massive scroll containing a reform petition for the Joseon kingdom. Then Hyang picked up a strange object, something no one had ever seen before, a megaphone. Can everyone hear me clearly? His voice boomed throughout the hall, and ministers and officials glanced at each other, stunned. What is this? One of them whispered in confusion. Why is the Crown Prince's voice so loud? What kind of device is he using? But Hiang remained unfazed. Thanks to the opportunity given by my father, I am now able to address all of you, esteemed ministers. So, without further delay, let us begin. The room fell into silence. Whether out of curiosity or skepticism, everyone was now paying close attention. With confidence, Yang began explaining his vision. Using various illustrations and diagrams as supporting evidence, he presented his ideas with clarity. The foundation of my political philosophy is to achieve the best possible outcome for all of humanity, he declared firmly. As you know, this was also the ideology behind the founding of the JOSEON dynasty. This aligns with the fundamental principles of a wise ruler, to prioritize the people and ensure their well-being. Some ministers began nodding slightly while others remained silent, waiting for what came next. However, there is a major issue in our land, Hiang continued. Our country has very little flat land. The steep, rugged mountains force people to crowd into limited areas. With so little farmland, poverty will only continue to rise. That is why we must promote not only agriculture, but also craftsmanship and trade. By doing so, the nation can prosper, and we can acquire what we lack from other countries. Some officials looked stunned, while others began to chuckle. The Crown Prince wants to rely on trade, one minister whispered, snickering. Too idealistic, another scoffed. However, most remained silent, watching with growing curiosity. Hiang stayed composed. He drew a new diagram and continued his presentation. Therefore, we must reform our 6 ministries and restructure the local government system. Several officials widened their eyes. But that doesn't mean we should discard all of our good traditions. The system we've used until now must be adapted to the times. Suddenly, the room fell silent. Now, everyone was truly paying attention. First, we must abolish the current 6-ministry system and replace it with 3 main branches: legislative, executive, and judiciary. Each branch will have specialized roles to ensure a balance of power. An older minister looked visibly shocked. Second, we need to reform the local government structure. Right now, too much responsibility is placed on a single person. Officials should divide their duties among themselves to improve efficiency. Some officials began whispering among themselves. Third, we must establish an education system that allows people to escape poverty. Basic education should be available to everyone, equipping them with the necessary knowledge to survive and prosper. A few officials' eyes widened in disbelief. Fourth, we must exploit our gold and silver mines, implement a fair taxation system, and reform land policies so that they don't exclusively benefit the nobility. When Hiang finished speaking, the room remained silent, not out of rejection, but out of sheer astonishment. Some ministers looked genuinely enlightened. This is far more revolutionary than I imagined, one official murmured. Just as I suspected, the Crown Prince is a mad genius. A heated debate broke out in the hall. Many of them were beginning to realize something. This wasn't just empty rhetoric. This was a blueprint for the kingdom's future. Meanwhile, Hiang simply smirked. This is just the beginning. The gathered ministers stared at him in shock, their expressions a mix of awe and confusion. Seeing their reactions, Hiang couldn't help but feel amused. If you're surprised now, it's still too early, he thought. There's still a long road ahead before I can truly reclaim my lost sense of joy. In the grand hall, Crown Prince Hiang stood tall after delivering his speech. Then, he concluded his presentation with a final statement. And that is my political vision. The entire room fell into silence, each person struggling to process what they had just heard. This video ends here, but the story isn't over yet. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next part.